I prayed to my deceased grandmother to take away my abuser. That night, she answered, "I am not religious at all." But my grandmother was deeply religious her entire life. She went to church every Sunday, had crosses and pictures of Jesus all over her house, and prayed constantly. She passed away recently. At her funeral, the great-grandchildren were each given butterfly clips as keepsakes, while the grandchildren received little bird clips. My daughter clipped her butterfly onto the passenger side sun visor in my car, saying, "Great-grandma will always be with me to keep me safe." I clipped my bird onto the rear-view mirror, barely hanging on by the tip so it wouldn't block my view. A few days later, I was exhausted, grieving and caring for my 2 young kids alone. On top of that, I was dealing with my ex, who had become increasingly abusive. He wasn't supposed to be staying with me, but he refused to leave me alone. One night he came over demanding to sleep in my bed. I kept telling him no. The argument dragged on for over an hour while I cried and begged him to leave. I had work in the morning and I needed to get the kids ready for school. Eventually, he finally left. Before falling asleep, feeling completely helpless, I did something I never do. I prayed. Not to God, but directly to my grandmother. I closed my eyes and whispered, "If you can hear me somehow, please just get him away from me." At 1 a.m. my phone rang. My ex had taken my car without permission and crashed it. At first, he claimed he just hit a deer. But when I saw the vehicle at the impound lot, my stomach dropped. The car was completely destroyed. He had smashed into a guardrail and a street sign at high speed. The entire vehicle was totaled. He was arrested at the scene, and I was immediately granted a no-contact order. But the weirdest part? He wasn't hurt at all. He never wears a seatbelt, and the crash was violent enough to demolish the frame, yet he walked away without a single scratch. And then I looked inside the wreckage. Everything was thrown around, shattered and ruined. Except for 2 things. The butterfly clip on the passenger sun visor and the tiny bird clip on the rear-view mirror. They were still perfectly attached, exactly where my daughter and I had placed them. It's been 10 months since that night. He is out of our lives, and my kids are doing much better. I still don't know what to think. Maybe it was just a bizarre coincidence. But in my heart, I can't help but wonder, did my grandmother answer my prayer? I think I talked to a ghost. 2 years ago, I was staying at a friend's vacant house, doing network and audio renovations. It was a massive 700 square foot home built in the 1980s. From the moment I first walked in, I had an unsettling feeling. I even told my friend the place felt haunted, but he laughed it off. A couple of the upstairs rooms always gave me the creeps day or night. Because of the summer heat, I usually worked late into the night when it was cooler, often up in the attic. Every single night, I would hear a strange bang, a knock, or some distant sound that pulled my attention. Every time I went to investigate, I found nothing. Eventually, I got the whole home audio system running and started playing loud music at night just to drown out the noises. But then the electrical anomaly started. One night, the lights in the downstairs laundry room began flickering violently. I had just installed smart switches throughout the house, so I went to check if one was malfunctioning. The switch was completely dead and unresponsive. But the moment I turned to walk away, the lights snapped back on. Spooked, I decided to pack up and leave for the night. I went out to my car, sat down, and shut the door. Instantly, the car locked itself and the trunk popped open on its own. When I stepped out to close it, my driver's side door slammed shut behind me. About a month later, I had to bring my son with me to pull an all-nighter to meet a deadline. As we walked from the kitchen to a downstairs bedroom, we passed the front entryway. The heavy front door was standing wide open. Thinking someone had broken in, I grabbed the smart home control iPad and pulled up the camera feed for the downstairs office, which faced the front door. Hoping to scare off an intruder, I spoke aloud to the camera. "Hello?" Through the audio feedback of the monitor, a voice clearly whispered back, "Yeah." Terrified, I quickly cycled through the other security cameras. When I pulled up the feed for the upstairs room, the one that always gave me the worst feeling, we saw the camera static distort violently. The smart lock logs showed zero record of the front door unlocking or opening. The Ring doorbell camera had captured nothing. 1 minute it was shut, the next it was wide open. The following night, the bathroom lights flickered while I was in the shower. When I walked out, every single one of the property's 250 lighting fixtures had gone their pitch black except for the single light in the room my son and I were occupying. Whatever was in the house was trying to get our attention again. We finished the job and left. It has been 2 years since we worked in that house, and we have never gone back. My daughter saw a mimic of her little sister. Before you dismiss this as a story of a child's overactive imagination, let me give you some context. My oldest daughter is on the autism spectrum. She is incredibly serious, analytical, and has a strict concept of truth-telling. She does not make things up. I trust her implicitly. The events took place a few years ago. I was relaxing in my bedroom when my oldest daughter, R, burst through my door. She was tense, trembling, and on the verge of tears. Gasping for air, she told me she had just seen an unmoving, unblinking version of her younger sister, W, crouched under her bed. Through quick, terrified breaths, R explained what happened. I went to my room to get my skates from under the bed. When I lifted the blanket to look, W was sitting under there. But she wasn't moving. She didn't blink. I thought she was playing a prank on me, so I kept saying her name, asking what she was doing. She just stared at me, completely still. I got scared and ran out to the living room. And W was sitting on the couch watching TV. "Mum, I don't know who is under my bed." I put my arm around R's shoulder to calm her. When I placed my hand on her chest, her heart was hammering like a trapped bird. Trying to keep my own voice steady, I told her it was probably just a prank, but she begged me to go check. I went into her room and lifted the blanket. There was nothing under the bed but dust and skates. Still, a cold chill ran down my spine. A long, narrow hallway connects our living room to the bedrooms. There was no way W could have snuck past R to return to the living room without being seen. Furthermore, W is extremely hyperactive. If she had pulled off a prank that perfect, she wouldn't have been able to keep it to herself. She would have been laughing hysterically all afternoon. Instead, when I went to the living room, W was completely relaxed, staring blankly at the television screen. She barely even registered my questions. My oldest daughter spent the rest of the day deeply disturbed, refusing to go near her bedroom. It wasn't until years later, when I started reading stories online, that I realized people call these entities mimics. To this day, I don't know what my daughter saw under her bed, but I know she saw something, and whoever it was, it looked exactly like her sister. The man who disappeared from the bar bathroom. A few years ago, I was at a bar in Worcester, Massachusetts, with a group of friends. We were at a spot called The Pint, a small dive bar with arcade games scattered around. A few of us were playing Giant Connect 4 towards the back, sitting at a high-top table right next to the game. Directly behind us was the bar's only restroom. The gap between our table and the Connect 4 game was extremely narrow. At one point, a man in a wheelchair needed to use the bathroom. Because of the tight space, we had to stand up, slide our heavy table completely out of the way so he could pass, and then move it back. He went inside and shut the door. After about 20 minutes, another guy came up wanting to use the restroom. We told him it was occupied, so he waited. He stood by the door for another 15 minutes, getting increasingly impatient. Finally, he asked us, "Are you sure someone is in there?" We told him yes. It was physically impossible for the man in the wheelchair to have left. We were sitting right in front of the door, and we would have had to move our table all over again for him to fit through the narrow passage. Growing fed up, the waiting man knocked loudly on the door. There was no answer. He tried the handle, and to our surprise, it unlocked. He pushed the door open. The bathroom was completely empty. No man. No wheelchair. A collective chill swept over our table. Once the other guy finished using the restroom, we went inside to investigate. The room was tiny. There were no windows, only a small ceiling vent that a person couldn't possibly fit through, let alone a wheelchair. We searched for hidden panels, checked if the mirror was a secret door, and looked for trapdoors on the floor. There was absolutely nothing. We asked the bartender, but they hadn't seen anyone matching the man's description leave. To make things weirder, several of the women at our table hadn't been drinking at all, so we knew it wasn't a hallucination. To this day, none of us can explain what happened. A man in his wheelchair entered a windowless room and simply vanished into thin air. Daniel's call. This story was passed down to me by one of my teachers, and it has stuck with me ever since. It took place back in the late 1990s, just a few years before cell phones became common. My teacher was obsessed with Halloween. One evening in late October, she convinced 3 of her friends to sneak out and drive to an abandoned property about 30 minutes away in rural Pennsylvania. She had heard local rumors about a boy named Daniel who had tragically perished alongside his family in a horrific house fire years prior. Obsessed with the paranormal, she brought along a Ouija board, hoping to make contact with him. Her friends were hesitant, but reluctantly agreed. They drove out into the countryside and parked near the ruins of the burned-out house. The structure was mostly gone, with only a skeleton of charred wood and a crumbling staircase still standing. They climbed the unstable stairs and sat in a semi-collapsed hallway, surrounded by ashes and debris. They set up the Ouija board. They asked if anyone was there, calling out specifically for Daniel. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. The plan felt like a bust. Frustrated and cold, they packed up and decided to head back home. But on the dark, winding country road back, their car struck something. The vehicle spun out of control and tumbled deep into a ditch. Fortunately, everyone was physically fine, but the car was badly damaged and stuck. They were stranded in the middle of nowhere. It was pitch black, they had no cell phones, and their parents had no idea where they were. On that particular road, they knew they could wait hours, if not days, before another car passed by. About 15 minutes later, headlight beams cut through the darkness. A tow truck came speeding down the road and pulled up right next to them. Relieved, the girls waved their arms to thank the driver. The driver rolled down his window and said, "There you girls are. I knew you were on this road, but I wasn't sure exactly where the crash happened." My teacher looked at him confused. "How did you know we crashed? Who called you?" The driver looked at them quizzically. "A boy named Daniel called my dispatch line. He said his friends got into an accident out here and needed a ride home." None of the girls spoke a word. They rode back in the cab of the truck in absolute silence, staring out into the dark Pennsylvania woods. My father's final message. My father and I never had a good relationship. Growing up, he was emotionally and physically abusive. I rarely heard him say anything positive, and he almost never said he loved me. I was always singled out, while my siblings enjoyed a normal, loving relationship with him. My last moments with him were filled with arguments, a regret I still carry with me. When I was 16, he unexpectedly passed away in a sudden accident, but right before he left his house that day, completely unaware of the life-ending accident he was about to encounter, he did something very strange. He sent my mother several incredibly long text messages. I didn't find out about them until days after his funeral. They were words I had never heard him say in my entire life. In those texts, he told my mother to tell me how much he loved me, how deeply sorry he was for the past, and how proud he was of the person I had become. He specifically named me, focusing all his regret and affection on the one child he had spent years putting down. He wasn't suicidal, and there was no logical reason for him to send a farewell message. It was as if some part of him knew. A few years later, I was staying alone at my aunt's house. After my father passed, my aunt had taken his personal home bar and all its decorations, setting it up in her living room exactly how he had it in his apartment. The bar area had always been my father's favorite place in the world. Late that night, I got up to use the restroom. The house was pitch black. As I walked past the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. A man's voice aggressively whispered my name from the dark. It sounded so real and so close to the bar area that I instinctively responded, whispering, "Yeah?" There was no reply. I checked the bedrooms, only to realize I was completely alone in the house. When my aunt returned, I told her what had happened. She began to cry, admitting that ever since they brought my father's bar into the house, they had been hearing strange noises coming from the living room at night. I still struggled to process it all. Was it just a trick of the mind, or did my father find a way to reach out and say the things he never could while he was alive?